Hello, and welcome back to Not a Minimum Viable podcast, where we bring you conversations with the builders, founders, and entrepreneurs who are shipping way more than MVPs in Toronto's tech ecosystem. My name is Manit, and I'm joined here by my co host, Rudy. Hey, Rudy, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
It's been a busy week. I've had a lot of stuff to do at work, and some of my other projects are getting closer to being released and launched. So I've been working on those, cleaning up whatever last few things are left, gearing up, filming like launch videos, things of that sort. What about you?
Pretty good. Yeah, I feel like when I have lighter weeks at school, given that it's my last semester, I sometimes like tend to take it easy. And then after like a couple of days, I start losing my mind where I'm like, oh, I need to be doing things. So started a bunch of like stuff on the side. I've been writing, trying to create some stuff. That's been pretty fun. Like I've never really explored creative outlets outside of schoolwork and things like that. And I think that's been a fun development. Takes, an extra bit of effort during the day, but it's a lot more enjoyable than I guess assignments and more structured sort of things. I don't know if you feel that way as well, but it's quite fun.
I
Um,
definitely understand. Since the past year essentially I've not been doing school and I've been working.
mhm.
I can I can relate to the idea of not feeling like schoolwork is like your main priority at any
Yeah.
point.
Are you looking back forward to going back to school?
Not really. No, I mean, I enjoy sitting in the lectures, but
Yeah.
everything else that comes with it, the homeworks, assignments, tutorials, all that stuff is not something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's exactly my sentiment as well. I really enjoy learning about new stuff, but then when I get some of those assignments, I feel suffocated by it. I don't know, but
I think it's
overall,
because when
yeah.
you're in the lecture itself, it's like you're making a choice to go attend, so you're choosing to learn.
Mhm.
But then with the
Yeah.
assignments and all those things, you're being forced
Yeah,
to
it feels like
to
an
learn. Yeah.
imposition, I think. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Anyway, that was enough chatter from us. I'm pretty excited about this week's guest. So let's not waste more time. Let's get into the interview. So I first met our guest today, back in our first year of university at the University of Toronto. And since then, I guess he's been popping up on my LinkedIn feed here and there for all the cool stuff that he's been doing. So now you're at Tempo Labs, which is a YC-backed startup. And welcome to Not a Minimum Viable podcast, Josh Karasra.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Extremely excited for our conversation.
Of course, we're excited to have you here. You're only our second guest so far,
Uh,
but
who's the first one?
Mithil Shah, I don't know if you know him.
Sounds familiar, I'm not sure.
Uh,
Unfortunately, couldn't have been the first, but that's okay.
you- yeah, and unfortunately, we were hoping that we'd have this interview in person at our studio that we're kind of in the process of signing up with. So
Oh, wow.
hopefully our next few episodes will
That's
be
cool.
from there, but yeah, more on that to come. Watch this space. But anyway, Josh, so what have you been up to? I haven't seen you in a really long time, and I sort of know what you've been up to on a cursory level from your LinkedIn, of course, but I'd love to hear the story from your point of view as well.
Yeah. I'll give kind of like a short version of a long story, but I'm originally from Edmonton. I think I've always been kind of like had a bit of an entrepreneurial itch and kind of started in high school when I founded this nonprofit called Speech Dojo. We basically taught students how to do public speaking, and we did this like online and in person. And it was cool to see that grow and kind of scale while we were still in high school. And we kind of realized like, whoa, it's pretty cool. Like we can actually do meaningful things and get meaningful experiences, and we don't have to be 40 years old to do that. Um, so that kind of like got this itch, and then it led to my first internship at a place called Innova, where we were running hackathons for corporate companies. I just had this incredible boss named Victor, and he really kind of inspired me to keep going down this entrepreneurial path and keep building things and keep kind of like expanding my mind into what was possible in the world. And I think that was really pivotal for me. I spent a little bit of time in consulting as well because I thought that was a good thing to do, being a Rotman student. And I eventually kind of found my way back into the startup space where I'm working at a company called Tempo Labs, where basically we're building applications faster. It's like an AI application that helps designers, developers, and product managers work all in the same space for software. So instead of designers having to work in Figma and then ship over their designs to developers, who then develop it, and a PM kind of oversees this in a separate platform. all of it kind of happens in the exact same space, and your designer is working with real code. It's just kind of under the hood, so they don't really have to interact with it as much. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to right now, and it's been really exciting. I just joined in November, so a couple months. But I do kind of growth and marketing and kind of, ops, a bunch of different things for yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And like when you were talking about trying out consulting because it seems like a typical pathway as a Rotten Commerce student,
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what was that experience like for you? Was it more of a deterrent from consulting specifically, or did you just like strengthen your drive to go and like build something of your own?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against consulting. Like, I think consulting is still a really great career to go into, and who knows? Like, maybe I'll still end up going into consulting for a little bit and having it, having some time there. It's definitely a place where there's a lot of smart people. Like, there's a lot of very smart people. They're very driven people. But I guess the one nuance is you're working with extremely large organizations. Like, you're working with like literally like the biggest companies in the world, and you're just kind of working on different things in those companies. Like you're working on like, 1% of that company's or like, 10% of that company. And you're just working on some like overarching analysis and strategy for this company. So it requires a lot of like kind of like high level, like executive type thinking. So for example, if in your career trajectory, like you want to be executive or you want to like jump into kind of corporate strategy or like, more managerial roles, I think consulting's phenomenal. Like I think it's really, really good, almost like not necessary, but like almost necessary to like kind of excel well on those roles. Um, and you do kind of have some entrepreneurial thinking that kind of goes on there as well, but it's not very operational. Like you're not like on the ground like operating things and like you'll make some recommendations and won't necessarily even be the one who's like doing those things. Like you won't be actually doing the things that you recommend they're doing. Like the managers of those teams will have to end up actually doing those things. So I think kind of working at a startup gives you a bit of both of those experiences because, you have to think about these like higher level strategic things and like think in frameworks of what's going to be most successful for this kind of strategy or you're trying to launch this thing. But then you actually have to go and do it the next day. So it's like you're a bit more grounded and like tied to like, okay, like how do I do very realistic but incredibly ambitious things? So it's just like a bit of a slightly different mindset. And I know I've been rambling. I actually totally forgot about the original question.
No, 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 you're all good. That pretty much answers my question because that's a common sentiment I think I encounter from a lot of people in consulting as well, is
Yeah,
that this lack of an incentive to follow something through, that you don't have skin in the
right.
game really.
Yeah,
And a lot of people who move into product and other management roles outside of that then kind of enjoy their experience a lot more because they're like, oh, I'm being able to see through something
yeah,
that
yeah,
I saw in the ideation phase and now, is out in the market and I'm getting
yeah,
feedback on it. So I
yeah,
think that's a cool component that when you bring it to the startup mindset, it's like, yeah, but now you have the growth rate, you have everything, like you have the drive, you're starting from scratch. So
yeah, yeah.
I think it's particularly cool in that aspect. But so going back to something I saw again on your LinkedIn, your Instagram and stuff was
Mhm.
Reminisce. I
Oh
think one
yes,
of
yeah, yeah,
your startup ventures as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Like, where does that idea come from? And to someone who doesn't know what that is, like a brief
yeah,
explanation.
yeah. So Reminisce was a project that me and a co-founder Ganesh ran 2 summers ago. Two
Mhm.
summers ago, where we basically were making a mobile app where families could capture their family story. So essentially, your family would download the app every single week. You would get a notification on your phone for a specific question, and it might be a question of, what was your favorite childhood food growing up? And then everybody in your family would record a, 2 to 3 minute response to that question, and then kind of submit it. And then you'd be able to kind of scroll through all of your family's answers. And the goal was that, at the end of a couple of weeks or a couple of months, we would actually make a book for you that kind of compiled all of your family stories in one place. And it was kind of from this drive of like, I wanted to get closer to my own family. And I thought a lot of families, especially that didn't live together, would benefit from like staying in touch, but also like having this really cool end product that you'd have. It didn't end up working. We ended up spinning it down, but I think I learned like a couple of like really, really incredible insights from that experience. Um, on like how to actually build a really good product. But I think more importantly, like just on like how important distribution is. Like for example, around the time that we were launching, there was actually a somewhat similar company that was launching like around somewhat similar time. And they were like we were like bootstrapped, like just, two college kids just trying to kind of make stuff happen. And these guys were like venture backed. I think they'd raised like, over a million, that kind of thing. But the product was fundamentally the same. If not, I think our product was actually a little bit better. But they're still around and they've poured, millions, like hundreds of thousands of dollars into marketing and kind of pushing on these things. And they were smart, savvy guys. Like they're people that were like, doing pretty good. But it just kind of showed me like how important like really good marketing and distribution was, because especially for a B2C product, like if you can't figure out how to get people aware of the product that you have, like you have no shot. Like you're dead in the water from the get-go. And I think I was very amateur when it came to like marketing and figuring out how to like create buzz around a product. And I think those are some of the lessons that I've learned a lot at Tempo now. But um yeah, like I think that was a big kind of learning from that experience.
And what was
Sorry,
that
Colin.
experience like for you
Yeah.
winding down a project that you had, been involved in right from the start and invested in maybe
Yeah.
from a personal level? Because I've seen it with other people when
Yeah.
their startups don't pan out and there's this like attachment to it because it's like your baby.
Yeah,
You've
yeah,
grown
for
it,
sure.
So what was that learning like?
Yeah. I mean, I think it teaches you a lot about yourself, right? Like I think you tie up a lot of your feeling of like self-worth in the projects that you're doing. So like when a project fails, it hurts you. It's like a little bit of a gut punch, right? Um, so yeah, like I think going through that experience, but it's good. Like it's definitely one that helps you grow and helps you kind of like be real with yourself and like be transparent with yourself and figure things out. And like I think we learned ton from that experience. It was like my first time trying to build like something real and like something meaningful. So yeah, I think that experience was good, but it was very painful. But it was definitely very good. And even now, like I think that one of the things I regret and still kind of want to do at some point is I think this app actually has the potential to like be rolled up with another company. Like there's tons of companies, for example, that have um like card game companies. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of like We're Not Really Strangers or like Parents Are Humans, where they're kind of card games that are based on getting to know, your family or getting to know your friends a lot better.
Right.
And I still think there's a play where like one day we can like try to approach some of these companies and try to sell the app, but like re-modify the app to be like their brand and their kind of vision and like, their kind of style of things, and it solves that distribution problem, right? Because you already have a user base of,
Yeah.
millions of people. But you have this additional cool service or app or, thing that, their audience might want to have. I just never actually got around to actioning that. So it's totally hypothetical. Like maybe they would
Yeah.
never want to touch the app, but I just think it'd be a cool thing to try to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm interested to know like what your experience at or like how your experience at Reminisced sort of contributed to the stuff that you're doing now at Tempo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like stuff is always kind of funny. Like for example, for Reminisce, like the current founder of Tempo, I actually like kind of not like pitched, but I like demoed Reminisce for him and like got him onboarded on Reminisce back in the day. Uh, so it was kind of like it was like just like a touch point of like I wasn't intentionally like thinking about working at Tempo at any point. Like it wasn't really something that was on my radar. But I think it was cool to have him like involved in my journey of like building my own startup. And then even when we were like applying to YC last summer, he was like, Tempo's a YC company he'd done before. He was like reading my application. He was like helping us out with the application. I feel like it was just kind of nice things to like keep him in the loop with, because eventually, not that this is planned, but eventually, when I was thinking about joining Tempo, he had already kind of seen like me and like my progression as like a founder and somebody who's building things. And I think it instilled a lot of confidence in him to want to bring me on, because he'd like seen all these kind of shots I've had on the board, all the failures I've done, and all this progression that I've made to kind of be more excited for me joining the team.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like I feel like it's a recurring theme that putting yourself out there with the work that you're doing has like
Yeah.
so many positive spillover effects in so many areas.
Yeah, yeah. Of course.
And that's
Of
the
course.
tech culture as well, right? You build the minimum viable product and you put it out there, and then you build on the feedback after that. So, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the two of us particularly are super curious about the Toronto tech space. My
Yeah,
introduction
yeah.
to that was largely through Rudy, and just getting to know people in that space in general, the mindset and the way people are working is
Yeah.
super cool. It's so fast paced.
Mhm, mhm.
What was that like for you? Just I think there's a bit of a culture difference compared to commerce students, especially at U of T. And then when you're actually out in the city building products, talking to people who are,
Yep.
from different backgrounds, doing different work. So
Yeah,
was
yeah.
there any, distinction there that you found cool?
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a distinction, and I kinda hate to say this, but, um, I didn't get, like, an incredible amount from the Rotman Commerce program, other than the fact that it put me in Toronto, and it kind of, like, gave me the chance to explore a bunch of other opportunities. So I'm not saying, like, the program itself is bad. I'm like, literally, my
Mm.
best friends are from Rotman. Like, I had an amazing time on the case competition team. Like, I love Rotman, and I, like, gained so much personally from Rotman. And it also, like, led me to, like, my professional internships, and those all have a compounding effect and help you do a lot of things. But I'll say, like, I think I grew the most in, like, outside of Rotman opportunities, and I was kinda mentioning earlier my first year internship at a company called Innova.
Yep.
And there's a founder named Victor Lee, and this guy he's really incredible, like, he's a really, really incredible guy. And he's basically kind of a serial founder, and he founded this company, Innova, with his wife, when they were a couple of years out of university. And he just kind of like gave me this rush of crazy perspective of like you can just like there's like this phrase like you can just build things, right? Like you can just do things. And he was very much like the epitome of that. Like he would kind of very aggressively pursue the things that he wants to do. And even now, for example, he's running like I can't even count like 4 or 5 different ventures with he's doing Innova. He's built something called Poker GPT where it's like chess.com for poker. He has V Club. It's like a kind of working membership co-working club out on the East End. Um, and just kind of like showed that like, if you're determined, if you're savvy, Victor's incredibly smart, but it showed that you don't have to be like genius. Like you can just be a very kind of like savvy person. And like everybody has the potential to do that. Like nobody is like barred from that kind of metric. Um yeah, and I think that kind of slowly, like, led to me going to more events like Socratica, and, there's, like, a really big creative community around Toronto as well, like, lots of really good designers and, musicians and that kinda stuff, and you're right, like, they do have a bit of a different mindset, like, they're a bit more risk-seeking, they're a bit more willing to, take on a project and fail that project and, brush it off and try something new the next day, versus in Rotman, I think it's a lot more kind of, like, career-oriented and, like, you can't fail things. It's, like, a bit weird to fail something, and, um, that's just kind of the vibe, and, yeah, I think kinda being exposed to that at, like, a very early time in my career, like, my university career, like, definitely set the stage for how I viewed, like, thinking about my career long term and, like, being okay with being a little bit against the grain for what I'm doing in the long term.
Yeah, I
That's
think
really
you
I was just saying, I think that's really interesting you mentioned that because I see that sentiment reflected in some of the stuff that you're doing as well. Like
Mhm.
not only, helping out with growth at Temple, you have there's this thing called Opusora
Oh,
that
yeah.
you've been
Yeah, yeah.
working on as well as like React components. Like could you dive a bit deeper into those things?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe I'll tackle React components first. That's part of Tempo. So Tempo runs a
Okay.
website called React Components, and it's supposed to be a bit of like an ecosystem for Tempo Labs. So it's a place where people can submit, and we have a bunch of like components that you can just kind of one click drag and drop into your applications, and it's real code, really functioning components. The goal is to get like really beautiful, nice components, and we're still kind of building that up. Um, I've since kind of like focused a little bit away from that. But I still think it's like a pretty cool thing in like the long-term ecosystem of Tempo. But Opus Soro is actually something that me and my friend Hassan took on to do a couple of months ago where we were just like so incredibly excited by the potential that these like, AI no code tools to have, like things like, Tempo, Lovable, Cursor, Windsurf, etc. And like how much non-technical people were able to build things with these, AI tools. And we realized that while there was like this kind of big internet community that was aware of this and like really on this, like in our world, like when we went outside and just like talked to people, like not a lot of people had actually known about them or used them. So this event was kind of a way that we could bring together like a bunch of students and a bunch of professionals So it's actually about 50-50, like working professionals and students. And just like teach people like how to use these tools and like actually help them build a product in a day. So, we spent one day basically where we had a workshop. We got some sponsorship to get some lunch and dinner and that kind of stuff. And we just kind of helped people build their products. And it was like really, really incredible that within one day, people that have like never touched a line of code, never like thought about building a software product, had built like fully fledged, fully functional, MVPs of products that, some of them were even like trying to monetize like after the event and stuff. And it's cool seeing like a bunch of Rotman students like read through API documentation and like just like stuff that I never would have thought, I'd see. So that was really cool. And we're in a tough place with Opusora right now because the event has like so much potential, like so much
Mm.
potential. We had space for 25 people and 70 people signed up for our initial event off of like no marketing. Like we just made like one LinkedIn post. It was like really crazy. Um, and yeah, like there's tons of potential and like yeah, we're just, like, incredibly busy right now because, like, I have kind of, like, taken up a bit of a bigger role at Tempo and Hassan, same thing at the startup he's working at Air. And it's just like, oh, man, like, we don't know if we can, like, really, really give the amount of, like, love and attention and care that this event needs to kind of grow it in that way. So it's a kind of like a tentative pause, but, like, TBD,
Mm.
we're kinda seeing if we can what we can do there.
Well,
For
if you
sure.
decide to have a second one, you gotta let us know, and
Yeah,
we'll be
yeah,
there
for
signing
sure.
up.
For sure. And sorry, what's your background again, Rudy? I think I didn't catch it.
Oh, so I'm actually I study computer science at UT.
Okay, sweet.
I've
I figured.
yeah. Actually, I couldn't help but draw parallels between the stuff that you did with Opusora and the recent hackathon that Temple Labs hosted,
Yeah.
because they both seem to be along the lines of having people that have never touched code build products in a
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
time frame and ship them to production. Could you talk a bit more about like how this whole process of having the hackathon at Tempo went about internally and how it was brought to fruition?
Yeah, so I'm a really big, like, proponent of hackathons, and from kind of a strategic perspective, hackathons make a lot of sense when you're building and launching, like, a new software product. And we will still be doing more hackathons. Like, we have a hackathon coming up on something called SaaS templates, like, Um, yeah, I'll get into that later. But basically, like the reason that I'm very long on hackathons is like two reasons. Altruistically, it's really cool to give people the ability to, experience something for the first time, especially something as cool as building your first product. Like that's a pretty amazing experience to give somebody. And I think that it really changes a lot, like the trajectory of a lot of people. I think for ComSci kids, it's a bit more normal because that's kind of like not an expected thing to do, but it's kind of a standard thing to do to kind of like get some experience, build some projects, get some internship at some company that sponsors the hackathon, that kind of thing. But for non-comp sci students, it's actually like very different. Like it's a very, very different experience. Um, in something that like you really couldn't do until like a couple of months ago, a year ago, to like meaningfully contribute code into a hackathon. Like, that's a pretty novel thing that you could do. Um, And then from like a business perspective, it's also very interesting because sure you get like 200 or something, 200, 300 potential users, but it's like more important is like the longer term effects of that. So for example, like from the hackathon we ran, we had a bunch of people build really cool things and then post those really cool things online. And then each of those really cool things posted online gets like 10,000 impressions. So, you have this like compounding effect where you gave 200 people free access to your tool, but now you have like 50,000 people that are aware of your tool just from that kind of initial investment in the hackathon. And that's also a really cool thing about doing online hackathons is like there's like very good compounding effect of the traction that you get and the people that use your tool, especially when people make like really, really sick stuff. Then that's like, obviously even better. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And later on, we just launched something called SaaS templates, where we basically integrated like pre-set up templates for payments with like Stripe and Polar and authentication and database. So, you know, when people set up a new project, especially if you're not technical, it takes, I mean, even if you're technical, right, it takes you like 30, 40 minutes to set up all these things. And if you're not technical, it might take you days and, millions of credits and that kind of stuff to set up these things. But we've kind of pre-configured the payments and, the database and all these things, and that's really cool. Like, I think that's like a ton of potential for people to build like SaaS software and like a matter of hours, and I think that's like really, really crazy potential. So we're like partnering with a bunch of these like, service providers to like run a SaaS hackathon where people are building SaaS software online. We haven't launched that yet, but that's going to be in the works. Yeah.
Any chance you're doing the next hackathon in person? Because I've been at the Temple office before, and it's
Oh,
so
nice.
nice. It's so cool.
Oh, nice. When were you in the Tempo office?
I was there for one of the AI Friends meetup.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
been a couple of months, but yeah,
yeah. I'm not sure when we'll be doing in person stuff, but yeah, TBD, TBD.
Right. But it's still exciting, I think. But one thing you mentioned a few minutes ago was like about the risk averseness or like the difference that you saw after Rotman. And it's like this is a common sentiment that I've encountered talking to people in the tech space. So I'm just curious about how different do you think that risk profile is, and if that disconnect between people in the business community strictly versus people building in the tech space is hindering like the growth of this community.
Mm, yeah. Okay, I'll share an interesting observation that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but
Sure.
it's an observation me and my roommate Hassan have actually talked about, in that a lot of Rotman people, when they're in Rotman, and when they're kind of early career, they're a little bit skeptical of like people doing startups and a little bit like risk averse. But then very shortly after that, like very shortly after people have had like a year or two experience in like the professional careers, they're like all of a sudden way more receptive to like people doing startups, and they're like, oh, like maybe I'll join one too. Like maybe, maybe that'll happen. My thinking is that it's a bit of just an exposure thing. Like
Yeah.
most people aren't really exposed to enough about the startup space and about the tech space in Rotman. And this leads to kind of like this, like, okay, we have this like tried and trusted path, like we should kind of follow this path. And then, after we've secured this path, we can maybe explore other things. And there's merit to that. Like there's like, I think
Yeah.
that's actually not a bad thing to do. But I think what is a bad thing to do is to be like inherently like negatively skeptical and like not like pushing down, but like kind of like not open arms embracing and supporting, also the other stuff that's going on in the world. But um, I think eventually, like people come around and people understand the space, but usually it just takes people some time to get acquainted with it.
Yeah, and I think this is like a feature of, I don't know about a lot of universities, but U of
Mhm.
T specifically, I think exposure between programs would be a lot more beneficial to students.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
noticed this in Rotman specifically, where people have this, I guess, inherent ignorance towards what people are capable of doing outside of
yeah,
the business community. Because engineering students and, CS students and even across the other programs, people can be building things and products and starting companies. They're taking risks and they're
yeah,
gaining those skills along the way. You were trained to do things like that. You have the expertise, you have some of the knowledge that people like, in those communities could benefit from, but they're skeptical and not keen to lend that expertise or try to get involved there because
yeah,
maybe they
yeah,
don't see the upside as much.
yeah, yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's fair, and like I think yeah, like but I do think it's getting better now. Like I think that there's more and more opportunities for that, like cross mixing and um like even in ramen, there's been a bit more of a push towards like VC and entrepreneurship, and like a couple new clubs that are doing pretty good. And yeah, like there's like Meraki, like a couple of like meetup things that like it's like Socratic for UFT basically. Um yeah, like I think there's a bit more of this like kind of intermingling culture and like, meritocracy and like kind of building cool
Hmm.
stuff together.
Yeah.
But it's still like early-ish days. And I think if we
Right.
give it some time, like give it some time and a couple of like key community people in Toronto that are like really pushing for this and like really like continuing to build this out. I think it'll only continue to get better and better. And like the goal is that, like one day Toronto is kind of like a better version of Waterloo, right? And you're like that might take some time, but I think there's like tons of potential. Like there's no reason why that shouldn't be the case
Exactly.
because of like the literal location that we're in and like how much access that people in Toronto have to like the tech space and the entrepreneurship space. And like there's so much happening in Toronto that like is really really not taken advantage of to like facilitate this like ecosystem that you're
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah, I think people take it for granted, but I'm also optimistic on that over the next few years. But if there is such a disconnect between the tech and the business community, as somebody who's, right now focused on growth at a startup, like,
Mm.
does that impact how you're thinking next about growth or about scaling? And if so, how?
Sorry, can you rephrase it? I'm not sure I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean.
So like if you're trying to like grow a product
Mhm.
specifically, at Tempo and you're focused on growing it, you're focused on scaling it, if there is such a disconnect between people in the business community who are, you would be beneficial from if they were receptive to the product, does that impact how you're thinking about getting new users or promoting your product?
Yeah, I'll say not exactly for us. Like our user base is pretty global. Like we don't, for example, like focus on Canadian customers. Like if not, it's mostly based out of the US. Like all of
Mhm.
our stuff is based out of the US. So like on a practical level for like a company at Tempo scale, it's not as important because like we're like an internet company. Like it doesn't matter where our user is based out of. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter where we're based out of. Like it all like for example, some of the biggest companies in this space are based out of Europe, but the customer base is in North America. So yeah, in short, like it doesn't actually matter as much for us, but it is cool. Like it is cool to be building around people that are like also building in the same space. For example, like I think we're the only company in all of Toronto that's like really, really into space. And that's like kind of nice, but it's kind of not nice because like it would be cooler to like go to some events and like see your competitors and like,
Yeah.
be able to talk with people and like, push each other forward. Versus now we kind of have to like see this stuff happening purely online and just like product releases and that kind of stuff. So it would be cool to have like a bit more people like competitively pushing us forward. Not that there's like a lack of that. Like the space is like literally like totally booming in like every week where like people are launching stuff like every single week.
Yeah.
But it just would be cool to have some like in-person energy as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned something about like how YC is a relatively like smaller company. I've noticed that there's been a trend recently where a lot of these like smaller, leaner startups
Yeah.
are going insane with like the revenue that they're generating, the ARR and all
Yeah.
of that stuff. How do you think like I need to phrase this question properly.
hmm
Do you think having like less people in the startup makes it, I guess, sure, it gives everybody more autonomy, but does it help you increase the speed at which you're able to get stuff out into the market?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I think it definitely does. Like I think that there's something to be said about like when you have less layers of like approval and you have less like managerial layers and people that need to be consulted to make decisions, you're just able to make decisions really, really fast. Like I think you have these, yeah, you're right. Like teams of 4 or 5, like sub 15 teams that are doing like hundreds of million of ARR or like raising hundreds of $1 million. Like that's very impressive. And it's because like and most of these companies tend to be AI companies too, right? Like they tend to be like the cursors, they tend to be like the deals or like the bolts. And it's twofold. It's because you have teams that are able to work really, really fast, but it's also because you have like these AI products that are generating like an immense amount of value, like value that's like almost like indisputable value. Like for example, like a lot of the companies that we're talking to, so we're like starting to go a bit more into the enterprise motion. Like right now, we've been focused purely on B2C, but we've had some inbound interest. So some like enterprise companies that have come to us and they're like, "Hey, like we really like Tempo and we want to kind of implement it into our system." And one of the things that we're seeing is that companies are still very early days in implementing Cursor. And for people that don't know, Cursor is basically like the AI tool that all the developers are using to kind of help code faster. And it's very interesting because Cursor is like a no-brainer addition to any software company. Like there's like zero reason why as a software company, your developer should not be using either Windsurf or Cursor. Like there's like literally zero reason. And when your value proposition is like that high, like you're just gonna skyrocket your growth. Like every individual developer is using Windsurf or Cursor, and like soon every corporate developer will also be using Windsurf or Cursor. So like yeah, I think this combination of like really high agency, fast moving teams that don't have to like go through a lot of approvals to make decisions, coupled with like a space that's like ready to give so much value because the value proposition they give is like indisputable value. There's like 10x value, like 100x value that they're giving for like, whatever price. I think those two things contribute to like, yeah, really small teams with fast growing pace.
How do you expect this trend to continue in the future? Do you think teams are going to continue to get smaller and like we're going to start seeing an emergence of like 2 to 3
Yeah.
people based companies blowing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that's already where we are. Like I think we're already seeing that, and I think that'll continue to get better and better. Like, you know, you'll have one man teams that can do really good marketing and really good product and really good design because, the AI will enable you to do that. But I think like you'll still need multi-person companies. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, maybe you won't. Like maybe you'll actually just have like I think people are saying like, the goal is to get the first billion-dollar company that's solo founded. And I don't think we're terribly far off from that. Like I think that's within the realm of possibility in the next little.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then from your specific standpoint, you were talking about, how you're getting interest from the institutional side as well now for Tempo. Do you think as a growth pathway, that is the way to go for AI companies or like people building assistant products, that you target the B2C channel first, and once you have individual users, you know that the adoption is going to be smoother on the corporate level because it is individual users at the end of the day working within those institutions, as
Yeah.
opposed to the reverse channel.
It just depends on the product. Like some products you can do that because they're products that both individuals would use, irrespective of if they're working at a company, but also like individuals that companies would use. But some products are just like enterprise products, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're like an AI recruiting thing or something, like individuals will never really use that. Like it's just like a
Yeah.
pure enterprise sell. Versus our product is very like both individuals and enterprises could use it. So we do like a B2C then B2B motion. And that's a pretty good motion. Like I think a lot of like your favorite companies have done that at some point. The Figmas of the world, like they have done this kind of motion where they make sure that people really, really individuals really, really love their product. So you have people to kind of like vouch for you as you do this
Yes.
enterprise sales motion because the easiest enterprise sales motion to do is when all of the people in that enterprise know your company, they've tried your company out, and they're excited about your company and it's just a couple of logistical barriers or hope like maybe no logistical barriers to implement the tool at the company. That's like a perfect sales motion. That's how you grow out like, hyper speed and there's like zero friction in selling to your customer.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because you already have, a quote unquote man on the inside, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, exactly.
the willingness to approach you is just it's done for already. Like you're already not starting at zero from that. So that's pretty cool. And then from your standpoint, like in terms of your career trajectory and your growth, why specifically the move to Tempo? Like you said that this was not like planned, right? This was not on your purview initially. And
Yeah.
how do you exactly get to that decision-making point where it's like, should I be joining this company? And then,
Yeah.
what did that do for your trajectory?
Yeah, like I it kind of started in the beginning of the year. Like I'm in my fourth year, so at the beginning of the year, I kind of like stopped all the club stuff that I was doing. I was part of the case team originally, and then I stopped that. And I was kind of just chilling. Like I was kind of just doing school and like doing literally nothing. Like wasn't working on any projects. Wasn't like tinkering with anything. Like I was just going to class. I was coming home, and I was just vibing, like spending time with friends, that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed that for about like a month and a half, 2 months. But then I started to get like a little bit bored, and I was like, I want to do something. Like I want to kind of like get back out there and kind of do something. And tempo had always been something that was kind of on my radar. So a couple of years ago, so Kevin is the CEO of Tempo, and
Right.
he's a bit of like a distant-ish family friend. Like we've spoken a couple of times. We went to the same kind of church group. Is how we met. Um, and he kind of knew broadly was up what I was up to, and I've always like really admired him and looked up to him. Like he was an incredible guy, both like professionally, but also in our church community. He was like, one of the main leaders and did a lot of stuff like build our church community a lot. So I'd always like really looked up to him as kind of like a mentor. But yeah, he kind of had asked me a couple years ago to be introduced to my boss, Victor. At the time, Victor had run a venture capital fund that was kind of writing small checks into like early stage startups. And I introduced him to Victor, and then Victor ended up investing in Tempo. And in that process, I got to see like the Tempo demos and like the Tempo pitch, and I was like, okay, like this is actually like very, very sick. Like I'm very excited about this. So I actually decided to throw in some of my own internship money into that investment. So I was kind of like a little like, mini angel investor inside of Tempo. So I would get like the investor monthly investor reports and just kind of keep up with the company like that. Um, so I knew that, they were doing really cool stuff and I knew kind of how things were progressing. And I just decided like, okay, I just want to like shoot my shot. I like sent Kevin this email of like, all the stuff I could bring to the team. Thankfully he was receptive to that. And then we started in November. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And I think like seeing the space continue to grow and how fast the space is growing and the like literally limitless potential I think Tempo has, I think has made me like more willing to kind of put my career eggs in this basket and be a bit more like, okay, like this is an incredibly unique and rare opportunity for me. Like I am comfortable pushing away some of the other things that I had the potential to kind of keep pursuing so that I can focus on this and kind of see where this goes. And I think it's gonna go pretty far.
Hey, that's awesome. And I think that's a really unique story. I don't think a lot of people get that opportunity or even see it as an opportunity if that falls into
Yeah,
their
yeah.
lap. But that's a bold move you made. So that's pretty cool. And then you said in your senior last year, I've been feeling this as well, honestly, for the past few months. Once
Yep.
you know, like I know what I want to do after I graduate, I have my
Sweet.
job
Yeah,
lined
yeah.
up, and then the willingness to care the same amount for school just sort of dissipated overnight at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
And now
I
I find myself struggling in class, like deciding not to walk off at the halfway point and being like, no, I should still sit here. I'm still in school. I need to listen to this. So I think that's
yeah,
been a struggle. But when you find like creative outlets outside of that, I think that helps a lot. So I'm really
agreed.
happy for you that you managed to find such a great opportunity on that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I know we've talked a lot about your work and your career trajectory and things like that, but now I'm more interested in the person side of things, right? So who Josh is as a person outside of the work when you strip that away. And you mentioned a bit about the case comp team. So I know case comps are not for everyone. So what was your joy what brought you joy in that? Not specifically the work,
Yeah.
but what was the excitement there?
Yeah, man. I think the people are just like really amazing people. Like I think it was a really good community in that even like my year was really incredible and I'm like best friends with some of the people from my like I play squash every Thursday with people from the case comp team. And I suck at squash. I just I do it because it's good exercise and they're amazing people. And even for example, like I interned in Calgary a couple of years ago, and one of the like my previous captains like invited me over to like a cooked meal with her mom, like at her house in Calgary, and it's just like these really kind of warm experiences where people like really kind of like the older folks that kind of take you under their wing and they help you with recruiting and they like coach you through life and they kind of help you out with that, and then your kind of cohort of people also become some of your best friends and like, it's a pretty big commitment, like, you're spending a lot of time, like, doing case comps and, like, you get to travel, so they'll do travel case comps, like, I got to go to, like, Copenhagen and Thailand to do these different case competitions, and I think, like, when you're in this, like, intense environment, you're, like, stuck in a room for 24 hours, like, doing this thing, but then after you get to go out to this, like, crazy Copenhagen party and, like, have this chill time, explore the city, it really bonds you to people and you really, really feel this, like, deeper connection to the people that you spend time doing that with. So that's what kinda got me going, and I was also learning a lot. Like, initially, as, like, a first year, second year Rotman student, like, case comps teach you a tremendous amount about, like, how to learn about an industry really, really fast, how to, like, strategically think about that, how to communicate those ideas. Like, a lot of times your judges in these case comps are, like, kind of executives or, like, senior people that are working in these niche industries, and you have to communicate to them like you're not, like, super dumb and you know a little bit about the industry that they work. That's actually a really good skill to have, to kind of, like, digest that information and, like, understand the business models and the mechanics of businesses and the levers that, need to be pulled to make stuff work, and it's, like, kind of like mini consulting intro, so,
Mhm.
yeah, lots of value to be had, but, like, yeah, just, like, really amazing people and, like, really fun experiences through that.
Hey, that sounds pretty exciting. Okay, and so the next few questions are we had built this initially as rapid fire questions, but
Yeah,
on our
okay.
first guest, we realized they're not some of them are not really
Okay, I'll
rapid
try to be
fire, right?
concise. I'm a yapper, but I'll try
No,
to.
don't worry about it. Yeah, as much as you want, because we've given up on the rapid part of it. These are now just
Hard
questions.
questions.
So yeah, so we just want to get to know you a bit more, right? So what is your go-to comfort meal after, say, a long work day?
Oh man. I don't have one particularly. I have a lot of rotisserie chicken, like
Okay.
Longo's farm by rotisserie chicken. If I'm like feeling a bit like dirty though, I'll have some Popeyes. That's like a good, yeah.
Papa's is a good shout. I like that. Um, would you rather spend a whole day just like working at a side project in the cabin in the woods,
Yep.
or traveling to like a city that you've never been to before?
Definitely travel. Like definitely travel.
Okay.
I love work, but I think you gotta touch grass a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, you do. That's fair enough. Okay. We've spoken a bit about your projects and side projects and stuff. So this doesn't have to be work project. It can be
Yeah, yeah.
anything. What's the most random thing you've ever done or built just for fun?
Ooh. Oh, I mean, like when I was first trying like windsurf, I made like this like little Chrome extension that reminded you to cancel your free trials, and that was cool. Like I had never built anything myself, like literally done the code for it. So that was a cool
Yeah.
like first like dip into like trying to build something.
That's exciting when you see that like code run all the way, doesn't
Yeah,
throw
yeah,
any errors, and you're like, hey, that's the thing I wanted it to do, and it's
yeah,
doing it.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, just one on one, who would you pick?
Yeah, I'm a big Catholic, so I have to pick Jesus. But I
Okay.
think it'd be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. I bet he has a lot to say. Um, okay. What is your guilty pleasure tech gadget or app that you just cannot live without, but you
Oh,
really
okay.
should be able to?
I've been doing a lot, like an unhealthy amount of New York Times crossword. Like there's a New York Times
Oh,
crossword
okay.
app, and it has like all
Yeah, yeah,
the mini games of the day.
yeah.
I literally bought the premium membership because I wanted to play more cross, which is like kind of sad, but it's fun. It's good.
No, it's
Good app.
addicting. Honestly, the rush you get when you do that mini crosser under like 45, 50 seconds, you're like,
Yeah,
let's go.
yeah.
Okay. What's an app or tool that you think is totally underrated? That really should be getting more recognition, but people are just not seeing the value.
Tempo.
Okay, you know what?
That's a hard question. I'm actually a little bit anti-app. I'm not gonna lie. Like I feel like
Okay.
I don't like using apps that are not like totally critical. So like I'm pretty like minimalist on the tech side, which is I guess like a little bit contrary to like working in tech. But yeah, I'm not very like exploring of like different tech tools, like unless like people recommend them or something.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Honestly, I don't even keep like Instagram and stuff on my phone. Like I've been
Yeah,
reaching
yeah,
out to
me
you and
neither.
texting you from my laptop. Just that's why I keep forgetting about it sometimes. But honestly, healthiest decision I made.
Yeah, I think so too.
Um, if you could instantly master a skill overnight, what would you pick?
I think marketing. Like
Uh,
I think it's a skill that is actually incredibly underrated, and like people don't
yeah,
understand how needed it. Like growth viral marketing is like crazy skill to have.
yeah, and it's like broad enough that if you could just learn everything about it overnight, like why would you not? Right?
And you can't really learn it.
Yeah,
Like you
but
can't just like read a book on marketing and just like know how to do it. Like it's like a very very
yeah,
like in the weeds skill to have.
yeah, and I think a lot of like projecting where people's attention is going to be over,
Yeah,
the next short period. I think that's a cool
yeah.
part of it. Okay. Are you more of a night owl or like an early morning person?
I'm a night owl, but like working at an actual company where everybody's up in the morning like forces you to be a bit more of a morning person.
Okay.
Against my will.
Okay. Awesome. If your life was a movie, what would it be titled?
I don't know, maybe like running or something. Like something about just like moving forward and figuring stuff out. I like running. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. The two of us just signed up for the Toronto Marathon
Oh, no
in
way.
October.
That's hype,
Or
man.
I signed both of us up for the Toronto
Do,
Marathon
do
is
you
what I
guys do you guys run normally, or is that like a totally different thing for you to do?
I don't run. I absolutely don't run. I've only ever run a 5K 3 times in my life.
Okay, that's not bad though. That's not bad.
Okay, yeah, I run a bit when the weather is nice outside. I go
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
but even I've never run more than a 10
Yeah.
in one
But you know
stretch.
what? The Toronto Marathon happens right outside my apartment. So I
Oh,
see
awesome.
all the runners kind of go by and half of them just walk. Like, I'm not lying. Like, it's okay to walk. Like, I thought marathon meant you had to run the whole thing. Like, nobody was
Yeah.
walking, but literally, like, everybody was walking. Like, at least
You
on
know,
my part of the marathon.
the restrictions on the other side, if you sign up to be a walk marathoner, like
Yeah.
if they see you running, it's a disqualification. Like if you sign up to
Oh,
walk, you
yeah.
have to keep walking the entire time.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we'll be fine. We have a lot of time to train, and at least for the first 15 kilometers, you will not see either of us walking. That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the goal.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
hype,
goal.
man. That's hype.
Yeah. Okay,
Oh,
last question. This is a deep cut, okay? If you're ready for this.
Hmm.
Cats or dogs?
Ooh, dogs. I got a dog at home.
Okay.
And
Great.
yeah, dogs are superior.
This episode will now definitely be getting published. If you had said cats, I might have scrapped the whole thing. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Where can we watch the episodes?
Oh yeah, so this will go up on YouTube, will go up on Spotify as well, and Rudy will be posting it on his Twitter, so you can like find it anywhere. And yeah, thank you so much, Josh, for being here today. This is like a
Yeah.
great chat. Really excited to see all the things you're doing at Tempo and otherwise as well. So looking forward to everything you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope you guys keep doing this and bring on some cool people. Would love to keep up with how it goes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any last like words of advice or anything you'd like to say before we end the episode to anybody who's listening?
Advice. I feel like I'm not wise enough to have advice, but just keep trying things, keep building things, you know, keep exploring things, and like there's like actually like so much. And on that same note, don't just do that. Like also live a little. Like have some fun. Like especially if you're in Toronto. Like in Toronto summer, it's like so incredible. Like go outside,
Yeah,
go to some events. Like yeah, it's cool stuff to do in the city.
that's good advice.
Great.
Live a little. Like that.
Awesome. So with that, let's come to the conclusion of the episode. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of Not a Minimal Bible podcast. And thank you for tuning in.